For the Cleveland Browns to reach the heights that they are hoping to reach in 2024, it better start with a big start out of the gate. Your latest Locked On Browns is live now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd, and I appreciate all of you who make Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd keeps growing and growing. Don't miss out. Join the everyday crowd by subscribing to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show is always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. A lot to get to here. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Spring is sprung. We're starting to, get into the, atmosphere, starting to see summer right around the corner. The allergies are certainly picking up. So certainly some things to talk about here today. But first and foremost, I think, you look and digesting the schedule over a couple days, the Cleveland Browns, it is essential that first 6-game stretch. And now you're certainly talking about a home game against the Dallas Cowboys, on the road to Jacksonville, the New York Giants come to town, then a trip to the Las Vegas Raiders, the Washington Commanders, and of course, the Philadelphia Eagles. So basically, a big part of the Browns' success this season is going to come down to just how they perform against the NFC East. Now, keeping in mind, of those 6 games, 4 on the road. So that's, a lot to ask of a team early. But look, you were a good team last year. You were a successful team last year. You went to the playoffs last year. Can't be whining about what your schedule is or it isn't going to be. But the Cowboys, and I've talked about this a little bit. I don't think the Dallas Cowboys, and they got to the playoffs last year and they were a team that was really, really on the roll. I'm not sure this is the same Dallas Cowboy team. And I'm not sure they're going to be successful in 2024 as they were in 2023. I'm not sure that this team improved all that much. That first game, you're going to have a rookie, former collegiate right tackle making a start at left tackle against the reigning defensive player of the year in the NFL. Dak Prescott obviously can throw the ball all day long, but he gets himself in just as much trouble as times as he does get himself into success. It'll certainly be a big test for the secondary. CeeDee Lamb is one of the absolute best in the game, an incredible performer. You have certainly the nuisance on defense that is Micah Parsons, is certainly a player that the Browns are going to have to control. Jacksonville to be your first trip on the road, and sometimes you don't always like these trips to Florida later in the year because maybe you go to weather that you're not comfortable with. It will not be that big of a change weather-wise for the Browns to go down there in early September, so they should be ready to go for that one. And Browns got a pretty good game from Jacksonville when they played each other in December. But I think the Browns have made the moves. And, of course, you keep in mind this is a game that should be played by Deshaun Watson, so you factor all that in. Certainly something to look at there. Then the New York Giants come into town. Look, the New York Giants, I kind of like what the New York Giants did, but it's one glaring thing, and it's whether or not you think Daniel Jones is it. I do not think Daniel Jones is it. If I were the Giants, I would have found a way to select a quarterback in the first round. Malik Neighbors is a fantastic player. I think his rookie year is kind of going to be a wash because I'm not sure there's anybody there who can get him the ball. So that should be something the Browns could handle, is certainly the New York Giants in that week 3 matchup in Cleveland. Then it's 3 on the road. The trip to Vegas, and it'd be Aiden O'Connell, could be Gardner Minshew. The Raiders were a team, if you look at the quarterbacks and the way they went early in the draft, the Raiders were kind of the team that ended up, so to speak, as far as, if it was a game of musical chairs, the Raiders unfortunately just didn't get an opportunity. So they certainly were the first team out of the musical chairs round for quarterbacks. I like what's been going on with the Raiders. I think the overall improvement within the team, just the way the team is playing together, the improvements and guys kind of looking out for each other. So it kind of was a team without basically, any type of culture out there in Las Vegas. And I really think that's starting to change with Antonio Pierce. So certainly a tough one, but certainly a winnable game for the Browns, and certainly one that will be highly attended, in my opinion, by Browns fans. I've talked to a lot of guys, a lot of Browns fans who are making a trip. Certainly Vegas weekend is always a fun one, but also the fact that you can get in there and see your Brownies in one of the more beautiful stadiums, one of the more newer modern stadiums in all of the NFL in Las Vegas. Then he gets to Washington, and we talked about this the other day with Pete Smith. Certainly new head coach, certainly brought over some some extra pieces from Dallas that, he felt were a little bit more important to him than maybe the Cowboys felt to pay as far as reserves for them. So, and then of course, Jaden Daniels. I think Washington could be a team that's maybe headed on a better trajectory path than they have been in years past. But the thing with the Washington Commanders, and this is probably what benefits Cleveland, is this is a team you probably rather see earlier in the season than certainly later in the season as things start to develop. So, for that, and it is going to be certainly in Washington. The Browns have a lot of familiarity with the Commanders. They've played them several times over the last couple of years. If you remember, that was a game Deshaun Watson, his first year with the Browns, had a really, really rough first half. The offense just had a rough first half. Then Deshaun got it really, really going in the second half, through 3 touchdown passes, 2 to Amari Cooper. And the Browns were able to get out of Washington with a victory that day. There's, some games I've, just have marked as just, for me, must-see games. I mean, obviously, they're all, for me, must-see games, but the games maybe I'm most looking forward to. And that is certainly the Browns matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles. There is obviously the storylines. Browns general manager Andrew Berry spent a little time with Philadelphia to basically get, prepped up to get ready to become a general manager in the NFL. Of course, that was done, spending some time working with Howie Roseman over in Philadelphia. The other storyline is that Andrew's twin brother is a member of the front office for the Philadelphia Eagles. You look at the Eagles, last season, everything went along swimmingly. And then all of a sudden, when the injuries to Jalen Hurts, which were apparent and were pretty much there the entire season, it just seemed like with each week he went out there, you saw that Jalen Hurts was just maybe more a less and less version of himself. Certainly, halted his production, certainly halted a lot of the offense's production. The defense was, just hitting and missing and falling apart at times. This team has moved on from 2 amazing Philadelphia Eagle players in Fletcher Cox and, of course, Jason Kelce. So it's not even bringing in the fact, obviously, how difficult a place it is to play, in Philadelphia. It's a great crowd. It's a very excitable crowd. It is a pro-Philadelphia crowd. There's no question about it. So for me, this is a really tough one here for the Browns. So look, you can maybe go 4-1 through those first 5. Heck, there's an opportunity to go 5-1. But this becomes the first real game where you get into where it's going to be a tough one for the Browns. It's going to be a real tough game for the Cleveland Browns to pull this one out. It's Philly. They're a good team. It is a great crowd. Certainly a tough place to play, but it could make a lot of hay for the Cleveland Browns. Look, you can go 4-1 against 3-1 against the NFC East this year. That would be crucial. The Browns need to start strong. 4-2, hopefully 5-1 through their first 6. We're going to continue on here. Your latest Locked On Browns. We talk a little bit about running backs. Everybody stick around. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. As always, we appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd, if you ain't part of it by now, make a new plan, stand, subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. And of course, the show is always available and it's always free wherever you get your podcasts. I did a radio spot today, 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland. They kind of asked me a little bit what I thought about the running back position, certainly about where Nick is at, where Nick will be, and what the thought process is about the running back position up until Nick Chubb returns. Now, you look at the way the schedule is, and with that Week 10 bye, dead center. So basically dead central for the Browns. The much better positioning of the bye week this season than certainly it was last season with Week 10. So Browns will play 9, sit for a week, then they will play 8, and that's your week 17 regular season. Now, where Nick's at, and whatever that video was that people were putting up the other day, I have no idea what to say from that video, where that means where Nick is now to where Nick will be in August, to where Nick will be in October, where Nick will be in September. But I think you look at that week 10 bye, and you look at that week 10 bye week, and I think the first thing, that kind of maybe for me is kind of like the sweet spot. And maybe it's the week before against the Los Angeles Chargers, a home game. And then maybe it's you give them those 2 weeks after. And then now we're ready to go. Is it we wait till week 11? Is it, the bye week 10 is neat when Nick come back week 11? You can't rush this. There's no way to rush this because Nick, he's already been through it once. So the difficulties and just how much effort is going to take for Nick to return to the field a second time, you just absolutely have to put it at his pace. And, Nick, maybe the fact that he's been through it once will aid him in knowing when he is truly ready this second time. And I do believe it's going to be a longer process. I think everybody just kind of assumes it's ACL, it's surgery, it's recovery, and, we'll see it in 1 calendar year. Well, if that was the case, then you're thinking week 2. I think that's completely unrealistic, honestly. To just because it was 2 surgeries, obviously. So, it just was not technically 1 injury. It was technically 2 injuries. It's the fact that he's already been through it once. It's the fact that, when he happened to him before, Nick was a 20-year-old player in college. And, Nick is obviously now 28 years old. There are so many factors that you believe you have to be cautious, and it's just not going to be as quick of a turnaround. So I keep looking. And for me, hey, it could be week 9 at home against the Chargers. It could be most likely week 11 after the bye. Maybe it's even later than that. If you were truly a team that has aspirations to play deep into January, then, or even February, then Nick Chubb in September, October, and maybe even parts of November don't necessarily matter. It just shouldn't necessarily matter. If you can navigate the waters, and that's going to be the thing. Are you navigating the waters, or the running backs getting it done? A lot of talk about what Jerome Ford did or did not do last year. Jerome Ford, and in my opinion, I'll give him a lot more credit than a lot of people want to. When that Nick Chubb injury happened, and all of a sudden you just felt this, basically a balloon pop of enthusiasm that was brought out of the Cleveland Browns team. And they come right back and they score a touchdown, and Jerome Ford scores it. They come right back after the touchdown and get the 2-point conversion. Jerome Ford was responsible for that. Later in the game, Jerome Ford gets you a 69-yard run. It leads to, I believe it was a Pierre Strong touchdown. Jerome Ford totals you well over 1,200 yards last year, in a year where you thought his touches would be minimal. And look, yes, there were a lot of 0 or negative yard carries. And as much as everybody wants to put that on Nick Chubb, that is a collective offensive line, run game, run blocking, ball carrier. Everybody's kind of guilty in those scenarios. And we talked a lot in my everyday crowd. I know you remember the amount of time we talked about this. There was so much time last year where we felt it was like Jerome Ford with the ball in his hands as a ball carrier. It was like there was, the good angel, and then there was the devil. Good angel, let it develop. It'll be there. Meanwhile, the devil was saying, you don't have your top offensive linemen. You don't have your top offensive tackles. Just get what you can get. Hell with development. Get the yards out of there. And this is a difficult thing for a young running back. Still finished with 4 yards per carry. It's good. It's not great. It's not terrible either. It was good. You saw where Jerome Ford could aid you as a receiver. That stop and go route for the touchdown against the Tennessee Titans. Of course, that crazy touchdown and yard after catch run for a touchdown against the New York Jets on Thursday Night Football. So there's a lot certainly that is going to be on Jerome Ford. But then the question is, who is physically going to carry the football besides Jerome Ford? Nyheim Hines, I love the addition. I love the addition for what's going to be a 2-minute offense, pass-catching running back, a third-down specialist, a guy that certainly has some return ability. I think Nyheim Hines is a guy that's going to be able to produce for this team. But as far as overall running the football, I just don't know I necessarily see Nyheim Hines being part of that. And I don't think anybody else truly does. Pierre Strong, it seems with the moves they made this offseason, that maybe it's a numbers game that he's just not going to be a part of. And then you get to D'Onta Foreman. I'm not ecstatic about the D'Onta Foreman addition, as everybody knows. I really, really am still stunned the Browns did not address the running back position in the draft. Again, it was not a top-end running back class, but I still, in my opinion, was a good class with good value in the second rounds, third rounds, and so on, that the Browns could have easily been in on. There were running backs available on day 3 that I would have been more than okay with the Cleveland Browns. You're basically punching the ticket on. They didn't. Does that mean, because D'Onta Foreman, who does have a good relationship with Deuce Staley, does that mean there is something there and they really think D'Onta Foreman's going to be able to bring them more? I do remember a playoff game a couple of years ago. Foreman was playing for the Titans. Derrick Henry had been out for a while. Foreman was the only one really running with any juice that game. They kept trying to put Henry in. They kept trying to get Derrick Henry going. And it ended up being a detriment to them. They lost the playoff game, whereas I think if they had just said, hey, we got to do what we got to do to win, and we'll worry about where Derrick Henry's at next week, then maybe we would have won that game if they kept feeding D'Onta Foreman. So there's going to be a lot on the shoulders of D'Onta Foreman. Truly, truly, there really is going to be. Because I think Jerome, they really like the role that he can give them as a receiver, and certainly with that means you're going to limit some of the actual carries he's going to get. So D'Onta Foreman's going to be a guy on spot here for the Browns this year. Look, this is a team, yes, it's been trying to transition to more of a passing offense since they originally even made the move for Deshaun Watson, but he missed 11 games his first year. All the time he missed with injury his second year. So they are trying to basically transcend into this passing game. You still got to run the ball. It's the NFL. There's just no way around it. You get leads. You got to kill clock. So many aspects of it. So that looks like your top 2 ball carriers are going to be Jerome Ford and are going to be D'Onta Foreman. Look, Jerome could wow us all and go ball out because, I think a lot of times last year he did. And I think that was the biggest problem people had is, he was 1 week where he really balled out, or that it was a very minimal week. So I think, and I know the way you Cleveland fans work, you're not a big fan of hot and cold players. You guys want consistency week in, consistency week out. I get that. I do. But you look at the grand scope of what Jerome Ford gave that football team in 2023 and account into the factor, the situation and just where they were at after that Monday night game in Pittsburgh. And everybody was just so down. And look, that's what happens when you have a player like Nick, who's such a focal point of the team, not just for his skills on the field, but for the way he carries himself. And I think Jerome Ford did a really, really good job, and certainly a lot better job than a lot of people want to give him credit for. It's going to be Jerome Ford. It's going to be D'Onta Foreman. It's going to be Nyheim Hines. Does Pierre Strong stick around long enough? Or is there still somebody out there? We'll find out if the Browns do make a move here. If the Browns were to bring in another running back, it does make you wonder about when they think Nick Chubb is actually ready, or maybe it just tells you that, they weren't thrilled with what they have to this point and they wanted to bring more competition into camp. But it's certainly something to monitor. And the best thing in the world for the Browns would be able to, when Nick Chubb does return to this team, Nick Chubb returns and looks like the Nick Chubb we have all fallen in love with over the last few years. Closing out, going on to segment 3 here, your latest Locked On Browns. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. I talk all the time. My family and I, lots of purchases, 4 tickets. We use a lot of apps. That's kind of stopped here because you never want to get the wrong end of the deal. That's why I'm telling you, you need to use Game Time. Killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. The schedule is really week 1, home against the Dallas Cowboys. You're telling me that has some appeal? Week 7, week 8, 7, the Bengals are in town, 8. The Ravens are in town. Are you trying to maybe catch Nick Chubb's first home game? Maybe that's week 9 against the Chargers. Maybe it's week 12 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Game Time can get you hooked up and get you in the building. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Jeff Lloyd, we are closing out your latest Locked On Browns. We have your Cleveland Browns news of the day. And if there's one thing you're going to say about Andrew Berry and the type of guy he is Andrew Berry remembers those who did for him. The Browns today hired former Colts general manager and player of personnel for the Washington Commanders, Chris Polian. Yes, Bill Polian's son. Bill Polian was the general manager for the Indianapolis Colts for the seasons of 2009, 2010, 2011. 2011, the Indianapolis Colts went 2-14, and Chris Polian was relieved of his duties. He has been in front offices over the last few years within the NFL, most recently, of course, with the Washington Commanders. Andrew Berry was there for some time during the Bill Chris Polian. I'm going to call him Bill 1,200 times. So let's hopefully Polian we don't hear much from. But of course, Andrew Berry was in his infancy in the league was with the Indianapolis Colts, and this is one of the things you like is pay it back. Man, somebody hooked you up, somebody looked out for you. They're in an opportunity. They want to get back to work. You're a fool not to. And right off the bat, you have a working relationship. You know how each other do business. So just something that you're able to get into. So Chris Polian comes in, advisory role. And look, I know everybody, it's similar, of course, to what Mike Vrabel is going to do with the coaching staff. Polian's going to do the similar thing with the front office. It's just a veteran guy. And look, Chris's experience, coupled with the experience of all the time being around his dad. The guy's been in 1 million NFL front offices in his lifetime, year in, year out. Guy brings a lot of experience to it. So, do what you think can help you. If you have people that you trust, you want them in there. You want to be able to run opinions by them. You want them to run opinions by you to confirm or deny your own opinions. So Chris Polian comes in as an advisory to the Browns front office. There was a move today. The Browns waived quarterback Jacob Sirmon. They re-signed kicker Louis Haversik. All right, the 3 kickers. It's fine. It's fine. The kicker's going to be Dustin Hopkins this year, unless his leg magically falls off. It's just having bodies in. That's all it is having bodies in the building. Now, with Jacob Sirmon, that was 5 quarterbacks the Browns were carrying. The Browns are going to start OTAs this week. So Sirmon will be off of that. First thing, what it tells me that I do believe that Dorian Thompson-Robinson will be ready to compete and be a full go for OTAs this week. We have no word on what Deshaun Watson is going to do this week. You also have Jameis Winston, and of course you have Huntley. So the Browns have plenty to work with at the quarterback position. For Sirmon, it was an opportunity. It was always going to be a long, road for a guy like that, certainly. But probably a good sign for DTR. Certainly, getting to see Jameis, getting to see Huntley, guys with tons of experience in this league. So, we're going to get to that. Now we're getting to OTAs this week. Now, what are some things, you want to see, obviously, the offensive line and what's going to be different, what are these guys, working with a new guy. And look, it's been 4 years, Jedrick Wills has never had another offensive line coach in his entire existence in the NFL at this point. So it will be with Andy Dickerson, a new experience. What does he do to the veterans? Of course, like Conklin, of course, like Wyatt Taylor, Posick, even Joe Bitonio, where does, he work in with them? And, you still got to coach them. You still got to challenge them. You still got to, get the best out of them to get the best work out of them. So certainly, interesting from that aspect of, for Dickerson, who goes in there with all pros like Joe Bitonio and Jack Conklin and, Posick, who he did not have a relationship with. So certainly interesting how all that is going to pair out for these guys. I'm sorry, Posick did have a little bit of relationship with Dickerson. So certainly interesting how all this is going to work out. And, for a new offensive line coach replacing a legendary offensive line coach like Bill Callahan. And, he's got to get these young guys in and get these young guys, moving and grooving as he's, trying to build the best offensive line and get the best out of these guys he can for 2024. But as we all understand, there is a lot of, look-sees to what is going to be the Browns' 2025 offensive line and certainly their 2026 offensive line. Mike Hall, of course, getting in there, getting some, reps against veterans. Same thing for Zinter. Big days for these guys is, the Browns don't have a lot of high picks, but, these guys obviously look like they're going to be locks to make this roster. So they come in, try to get themselves established in their positional rooms, try to get themselves established on the defensive side of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball, and certainly with a lot of eyes on them. Mike Hall, of course, the Cleveland kid, Streetsboro High School, then to Ohio State, now back to, Cleveland, a lot of eyes, even though he's a second round pick, there's gonna be a lot of eyes just due to the localness of Mike Hall. I think a lot of Browns fans are really excited to see, what Mike Hall can bring this team rather. Zach Zinter, of course, he's a Michigan guy coming to play in Ohio. That story pretty much just writes itself. But Zach Zinter probably would have gotten drafted higher if he was able to do the testing. Certainly something that hurt him during the draft process. But the Browns got themselves a tough physical player, had a really, really solid career in his time at Michigan. Now it's time to see how that translates for Zach Zinter with the Cleveland Browns. With that, you look at, me, I want to see Jerry Jeudy, of course, some of the other new acquisitions, just getting really, really excited to finally get a look at what is going to be this 2024 version of the Cleveland Browns. Appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd. You're a bunch of filthy animals, but you are my filthy animals. Be like the filthy animals. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to continue throughout the week covering Browns, talking Browns, the schedule, OTAs. Everybody make sure you are along for the ride. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.